All right, guys. So we are going to jump into our college football topic for today. And said college football topic is running backs. And we're going to do something kind of fun. So Trevor and Brian have been meticulously going through every single roster in Division I college football.
Well,
I mean, just saying, right?
Not everybody. I'm not like, okay, does Texas State have a top 10 running back room? Like, there are some G5s I looked at, but
it's true. You did.
Yeah, I'm not watching film of like every South Alabama's running back room. You know?
But they have been letting their fingers do the walking, going through the rosters, figuring things out, and they are going to give two lists today. So it's kind of double the fun. So we're going to do top 5 individual running backs in the entire country. And we're going to talk about them. We're going to break them down. We're going to do Trevor's and we're going to do Brian's. And there's some intermingling there on those lists. And then in part 2 of today's show, they are going to put out their top 10 running back rooms in college football. Same idea. Trevor's got a list. Brian's got a list. We're going to break it down. We're going to go through it. There are some copies, and then there are some differences, and that's what makes these lists so much fun. So we're just going to jump right into this thing, and we are going to have a lot of fun with this. So, you guys ready to jump on into this thing?
Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a really fun year at running back.
Yeah,
because I don't know that there's a lot of like star running backs beyond like a couple guys, but there's a lot of really good backs in college football this year. Some are established and some are we're predicting. There's a lot of guys I'm like, dude, I can't put this guy on my list, but he's going to be really good, you know, or I don't have this running back room on my list, but this is really good. And the portal has really quietly impacted running back rooms in a much bigger way than it gets talked about. And in Notre Dame's schedule, obviously part of that as well, but our focus is it's not a Notre Dame show. It's we're breaking down college football.
It's for the college football landscape.
But little things like the ACC is sneaky good at running back this year. Like, it's not getting a lot of talk, but I'm like, dude, there aren't a lot of teams in the ACC that don't have a potential good running back this season coming back, either a transfer in, a guy that's kind of emerging, or like in Duke's case, a kid that was hurt kind of most of last year that's coming back, who was a pretty darn good player the year before, and the Moore kid. So that was interesting. A lot of transfers impacting the Big 12 running back rooms, you know, and then the SEC, it's like there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of projection needed in the SEC, but there's a lot of potential. There's some young backs. There's a couple rising sophomores that could have some say. There's a couple underrated groups. So, you know, Trev, this was a lot harder, and you and I discussed this. The top 5 and the top 10, the top 5 players in the top 10 units, was not an easy thing to do out beyond the top 2 to 3 of both groups. And it's not because, well, after the top 3, there's nobody good. It's like there's just a lot of good running backs and a lot of good running back rooms in college football this year, which made this a really fun statistical study and film study. Like, I went to B-Dubs yesterday. I took my wife to to her massage and then went and sat at B-Dubs, and I'm like just doing film breakdowns and data research the whole time, you know, and it was a ton of fun. And because it's like there's a lot of good backs in college football this year. Not a lot of elite backs, but just a lot of good college running backs. I don't know how many what they are in NFL draft or whatever else. I don't care. This is college football.
Yeah, this isn't that show. This is not the NFL draft show.
And that's fine. I mean, I watch those shows. It's just that just because you're not an NFL draft prospect doesn't mean you're not a darn good football player in college.
Exactly.
100%. And there's just a lot of those guys. Like some of the guys we're talking about, they're not NFL guys, but they're going to be good college football players, either starters. There's a lot of teams with like really good number 2s this year too. Like, there's a lot more 1-2 punches in college football now than I've seen in a long time. And that's what I think is going to make this fun.
Trevor, before we get to your list, because we're gonna put your top 5 list up first, but I want to know, did you have trouble putting the top 5 together? Was it an easy thing to put the top 5 together? You know, were you wrestling with some things? Like, where are you at with putting your list together? I just want to get a little preview.
My top 5 was definitely easier to put together than my top 10.
Okay.
Because at least with my top 5 guys,
I'm looking top 5 players is better than your top 10 room. Yeah.
Yeah, because at least with the top 5 individual players, I'm looking at just their stats. Whereas when I'm looking at rooms as a whole, like, spoiler alert, I have a team in my top 5 running back rooms in the country, and I don't have one of their players, any one of them, in my top 5 running backs in college football. Now, they're on my breakout list, players to watch, but that's what's tough is balancing, okay, what makes the room a top 10 room and what makes the guy a top 5 guy. And so that was hard to balance.
Because we have a top 5 back
Mm-hmm.
that we both have the same top 5 backs.
Yep.
Just not quite the same order. But one of the guys in our top 5, it is not part of a running back room that ranks in our top 10, nor for me did it even come close. It was kind of closer for you, Trev, but like that was interesting because, like you said, just because you have the top back doesn't mean you have a top room, unless you have obviously, if Boise State's running back room was one of the best in college football last year, they didn't need a second back.
Yeah.
But for some teams, it's like your number one necessarily, like your room is maybe not as strong, even though that guy is better. But those two rush for more than your two. So like you could have a top back, but another team had, and your top back goes for 1,200, and then your next back goes for this is how it was in Notre Dame when Darius Walker went, back-to-back years with over 1,000 yards. Like the next highest guy in both of those years didn't run for a lot of yards. You know what I mean? Especially since Sean Powers Neal got injured. But like in 2005, for example, Darius Walker rushes for 1,196 yards. Notre Dame only had 2 other players go for 100 yards or more. You had Travis Thomas at 248 and Sean Powers Neal at 100. That's it. And so then you add it up that's only 1,400 yards. You could have a running back room with 3 guys and none of them go for 1,000, but they have 600 more yards than your running back room. And that's kind of the point. Saw the same thing in 2006 where Darius Walker runs for 1,267 and they only had one other back, James Alders, go for over 80 because he had 142. Yeah, you had a 1,200-yard runner. You think, oh, it's a great room. No, he's a good back, but your room was kind of nothing after him. And so that's why there's a difference between, and a lot of people, Trev, we see a lot of these rankings in magazines, and it's essentially the running back room is essentially the 10 best running backs, essentially. And I don't think that's what constitutes a great room per se. It just, those are the individually best players. And that was an intriguing part of it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding out that balance between top guy versus top room is interesting. This is going to be a fun one to dive into, but I'm ready to start breaking down my top 5. This one's going to be a fun one to dive into.
No doubt. No doubt. So without further ado, Brian kind of put it out there that you guys have the same 5 guys, but they're all in a different order. So that'll be kind of an interesting piece to this as well. But we're going to roll out Trevor's list first. And what we're going to do is we're going to do how we usually do these lists. We're going to start at the bottom and we're going to work our way up to the top. And so since this is a top 5 list, we're going to start at 5. Brian and Trevor, your number 5 back is...
He thinks he's funny.
Dang, I was trying to do a little drum roll, trying to get the anticipation up. And my IT guy failed me.
Yeah, he did. He did. You ready, Trev?
Always.
I'm bringing it up when you start talking about him. I don't want to give it away.
Oh, okay. My apologies. That's
okay. Hey, I don't take anybody's moment, Trevor, even yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
This is your news to break, brother, not mine.
Fair enough. Well, Brian mentioned it at the start of this segment that the ACC has a lot of sneaky good running backs this season. And 3 of my 5 top running backs live in the ACC. Number 5 for me is Jamal Haynes at Georgia Tech. Now, you go through and you look at what he did last season. He didn't go over 1,000 yards. That's going to ding him a lot for some other people. I don't really carry that much weight into that. I don't think you have to be an 1,000-yard rusher to be an effective running back. But you go and you look what he did. You guys know me. I carry a lot of weight into what players do in big games. We're talking about somebody who he played 567 snaps last year. He has 25 career starts, 944 rushing yards, 5.6 yards per carry, 9 rushing touchdowns. But you go and you break down some of the bigger games that he played in. He went for, in the opener in Ireland against Florida State, 11 for 75 and 2 touchdowns. Now, yes, Florida State ended up not being good. I would make the argument that the Florida State team on August 24th, when they played in Dublin, Ireland, was a little bit different than the one Notre Dame faced, I believe, on November 3rd.
And it was also in his head was still a big game.
Absolutely. You go through and you look what he did against North Carolina, ripped off a 68-yard game winner, 19 carries for 170 yards, 2 touchdowns against Georgia in that crazy overtime. Literally.
Yeah.
You know, and the week before, he went for 19 for $128, averaged 6.7 yards per carry. Against Miami, now everybody's going, well, he only had 3 carries. Yeah, for 83 yards and a touchdown against Miami, the number 4 team in the country at that point in time. On the road against Georgia in Athens, 13 carries, 91 yards, averaged 7 yards a carry. Everybody, yes, I understand the game went into overtime, but if you guys remember, first of all, overtime only starts on the 25-yard line in college, and Haynes King had a lot of their total yardage in that overtime. Well, I remember what Notre Dame's rushing attack looked like against Georgia, and none of their running backs went for 13 for 91. And so that was a really impressive performance, and they capped it off in a bowl game against Vanderbilt, 17 carries, $136 on the ground. So Jamal Haynes is my 5th running back in here. Really like what he's doing. Actually, 3 of my 5. My 4th guy is somebody on Notre Dame.
Real quick, Trev, he got hurt against Miami.
Yeah.
He only played 5 snaps that game. And in 5 snaps, he had 83 yards rushing on 3 carries.
Yeah.
He was banged up a lot last year as well.
My 4th guy on this list also resides in the ACC. It's Desmond Reed from Pitt. Now, he is somebody, again, electric playmaker. 966 rushing yards, 5.3 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns. As a receiver, he totaled 52 receptions, 579 yards, 11.1 yards per catch, and 4 receiving touchdowns. He was the team's 2nd leading receiver as the starting running back last year. So he's coming into his, I believe, his 3rd year as a starter. He has 18 career starts. He played 607 snaps in 2024, but he is an electric playmaker, guys. And you could say some of the same things about him, like what I said about Jamal Haynes. Big moments on the road against SMU, 49 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, 44 receiving yards. Against Clemson, 68 rushing yards, 108 receiving yards off of 10 receptions. Then against Toledo in the bowl game, unfortunately, they lost 33 carries, $169 on the ground, then 1 rushing touchdown. Desmond Reed is going to be a very dangerous threat that Notre Dame's going to be facing down the stretch of this season. But he, as what Brian alluded to earlier, he pretty much carries the weight of Pittsburgh's running back room. But it's a pretty big weight because Desmond Reed is a darn good football player, man. My top 3, before I reveal who my 3rd guy is, really between 1 and 2, because Brian and I have the same players on this list. But look, guys, the top 3 guys, top 2 guys have an argument to be in either spot. But when I talk about Isaac Brown at Louisville, he is somebody that burst onto the scene as a true freshman. I mean, he really impressed me last year with what he was able to do, and he carries the weight of pretty good-sized weight of what Louisville was able to do on the ground last year, but he played in all 13 games, started 9 of them, and I believe he started the final 6 games of their season last year. 389 snaps, 1,100-yard rusher, 7.1 yards per carry, 11 rushing touchdowns. You go back and you break down what he did in some of his bigger games that he played in. Against Notre Dame, really good defense. Rush defense a little questionable, but on the road against Notre Dame, 13 rushes, 72 yards. Against Miami, 9 carries, 56 yards, 1 touchdown. Against SMU, he had 117 yards on the ground. He gave Clemson's defense a heck of a time. On the road in Death Valley, 20 carries, $151 on the ground, 1 touchdown. On the road against Kentucky, rivalry game in the SEC, 26 carries, 178 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, averaged 6.8 yards per carry. Isaac Brown is joining a backfield and an entire running back room that is very loaded heading into this year, but they don't have the sexy, like we're in the SEC, we're in the Big Ten. I think that's why some other lists are sleeping on them. Us here at Irish Breakdown are not sleeping on Louisville's backfield.
No.
Because, man, it is dynamic.
Yeah.
It is absolutely dynamic. My second guy is Nicholas Singleton at Penn State. I go through and I look at him, and he is somebody that has been doing this for quite some time. He has 27 career starts, played 540 snaps last season. He's a part of a loaded backfield for Penn State. Last year, he had 172 carries, 1,099 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, 12 rushing touchdowns. And he also added 375 yards on the ground, or through the air, and then 5 receiving touchdowns. I think he carries a little bit more of the weight for Penn State's running back room, more so than what Katron Allen does. That's why I don't have him in my top 5. But we're talking about a kid that rushed for 3 touchdowns and scored the only touchdowns for Penn State in the Orange Bowl, and arguably could have had a 4th if he didn't drop that one little flat route on the goal line. But you go and you look at what he's been able to do in bigger games. He averaged 7.3 yards per carry against Boise State in a touchdown, averaged 6.4 yards per carry against SMU at home in a touchdown. In the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, 10 carries, 105 yards, 43 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Now, he had some performances earlier in the year, a little bit shaky. He didn't have a 100-yard rushing performance after they played Bowling Green. But again, the dichotomy in that running back room, they share. He
saved his next 100-yard game for a pretty big moment, though.
Yeah,
that was one of the weirdest stats I saw last year, Trev, when I was like doing research on top backs. Nicholas Singleton had a 100-yard game in his first 2 games, West Virginia, Bowling Green, and then did not get 100 yards again until the Big Ten title game.
Yeah.
And he did that on 10 carries.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was 84 to 90 in the next 3 games. So you talk about being good in the biggest moments. That was certainly what Nicholas Singleton did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then taking us home, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one because I think it's a pretty much a given, but Jeremiah Love is my number 1 running back in the country. And I fall in line with, I'm sure, everybody in the chat, everybody else on the show with me, and the majority of the people throughout college football that cover it. I mean, Jeremiah Love was special. He is going to build off of what he did last year. 1,125 rushing yards, 17 rushing touchdowns, averaged 237 through the air, and 2 receiving touchdowns. So that is my top 5 list, and it makes for an interesting kind of dynamic when we break into our top 10 running back rooms. But as far as individual players, this is who I have as my top 5.
Yeah, we're in the same page, Trev. We have the same list. I give my number 5. I have Desmond Reed at number 5. There are probably 10 more better pure runners than Desmond Reed.
Yeah.
You could get into a lot of the guys that I'm going to talk about after we kind of go through this. We're gonna dive into sort of some of the guys that were left off of our list that were hard to keep off, and there's guys that are better just pure runners of the football than Desmond Reed. But as you pointed out, what makes him so good is that fact that he's so good at everything. And I don't even include his return game production as part of this ranking. This is just about what they do as running backs. And to your point, 52 catches for 579 yards. Of the top 5 backs that you and I have, nobody had more total yards than Desmond Reed. Nick Singleton was next at 1,474, but Desmond Reed had 1,545 total yards last year, rushing and receiving. And you had 1,110 from Jamal Haynes, 1,474 from Nick Singleton, 1,325 from Isaac Brown, and 1,362 from Jeremiah Love. So the production was outstanding, and he's a very dynamic all-around back. He's the best, in my opinion, all-around back in college football when you look at what he can do as a runner and as a passer. And I would like to see them use him a little bit, just a little bit more in the run game this year at times. At times they would kind of get away from him, but he's also not a real big guy, so you can't like bulk carry him either. And they're going to need to find somebody to take a little bit of the burden off of him. Number 4 on my list is Jamal Haynes. This ranking is not based on necessarily what they did last year alone. We're using what they've done in the past to evaluate how we're projecting them into this season. Jamal Haynes was banged up a lot last year. He was not healthy last year. And I've been very high on and look, I'll be honest, this could be a bit of a bias, but I've been very high on Jamal Haynes for 2 years. And I believe he was my first team all-opponent running back last year, I believe. But even with the issues last year of being banged up, you had Haynes King gets knocked out, then everybody's focus is kind of on him. When Haynes King wasn't out against Notre Dame, the outcome was not going to be different as a team. But when you look at what happened against Notre Dame last year with Jamal Haynes, once Haynes King went out, Notre Dame was able to kind of focus all their attention on them. And they also had a lot of offensive line injury issues last year, too. Their starting left tackle went out early in the season. And Georgia Tech's not putting in the kind of players that some other people did. So, and again, you guys got to stop looking at this as just who had the most rushing yards. This is about impact players. And so, like, for example, somebody says, why isn't Katron Allen on there? Because Katron Allen carried the ball a bunch. Like, Trev had a great example. Like, he's like if Tony Jones had 220 carries. He was at 5 yards a carry. So just because you have yards doesn't mean you're a great back, and we'll get more into that. But Jamal Haynes, to me, you put Jamal Haynes behind the Penn State offensive line last year, and he doesn't need 220 carries to get to 1,000 yards. He's going to be at 1,300 or so if he gets there. And that's exactly the thing we're talking about. And I think he's poised to have, if they're healthy, a big year. And they don't have to necessarily wear on him the way that they did last year, because I like the running back room, which we'll get to later. But I like Jamal Haynes a lot. I think he's a guy that can be a big play guy. He can be a hammer back. You know, they used him more out of the backfield last year in the check down game. I think that, you know, I'd like to see them use him a little bit more in the throwing game this year. But I'm a big Jamal Haynes fan. Speed, elusiveness, runs with authority. And like you said, Trev, he had some big moments in some big games last season as well. So, and that's something that I look at. You know, ran really well against Duke, ran really well against North Carolina. You know, ran well against Georgia, ran well against Vanderbilt. He's a very good football player. My number 3 on my list is actually Nicholas Singleton. Now, I think Nicholas Singleton was a better back than Isaac Brown last year, but I think Isaac Brown will be a better back than Nicholas Singleton this year when you count his third year. I think Nicholas Singleton is the best back at Penn State, and I don't think it's overly close.
No.
And you can look at rushing yards and say, okay, well, you know, Katron Allen had more rushing yards than he did last year. Yes, he did. He had 9 more yards than Nicholas Singleton. So he had 1,108 and Nicholas Singleton had 1,099, correct? Nicholas Singleton averaged 6.4 yards a carry. He did that on 48 fewer carries. So he had 48 fewer carries, but only had 9 fewer yards. And at the end of the season, also, when you consider that Nicholas Singleton had 41 catches, he's also a very good dual threat all-around back. I think that Desmond Reed's the best all-around back. The reason that I think Nicholas Singleton's number 2, the reason I have Nicholas Singleton as higher on this list is because I think there's a significant difference between them as runners. And I think Nicholas Singleton is definitely a more pure runner. And he was banged up at times last year as well. That's why his carries at times in the middle of the season weren't as great, is because I think they were just trying to nurse him through the season and get him through the season, and you let your bigger back kind of go. He got banged up against Illinois, did not play against UCLA, and then in the next 5 games, he only had 26, 49, 15, 45, and 40 yards. That was when he was banged up. Prior to getting injured, Nicholas Singleton was at 114, 119, 81, and 94, and he was averaging about 8 yards a carry. Gets hurt. The next 5 games or so, he goes for 2.6, 4.1, 2.5, 6.4, 5.7, 4.9. Then he got a little bit healthier. And in the last 5 games, as he got healthier and healthier, last 5 games, 87, 105, 90, 87, and 84 total yards. Also went for 6.7, 10.5, 6.4, 7.3, and 5.6 yards per carry. So there's this very big difference in the middle of the season. And it wasn't even against good teams. It was against USC, Wisconsin, Washington, Purdue. The only good team they played was Ohio State. And he was definitely not 100% in that game. So, but then against Oregon, SMU, Boise, and Notre Dame, he goes and plays very well. And as I mentioned, he's also an impactful player in the pass game. He had 2 catches for 33 yards against Notre Dame. He also had 4 catches for 43 yards against Oregon. So against Oregon, the number 1 team in the country, in the Big Ten title game, he touched the ball 14 times for 147 yards. That's a darn good football player. And so that's why he is on my list. I think Isaac Brown is I just think he's going to be just an absolute monster this year. Love this kid. Explosive, great vision, can catch the ball. I think that part of his game is going to get ramped up a little bit this year. But, Trev, you talked about it. As a true freshman, 1,173 yards, 7.1 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns. He had 117 yards against SMU on 10 carries. He had 72 yards on only 13 carries against Notre Dame. Also had 4 catches for 23 yards and a touchdown receiving against Notre Dame. So he was just under 100 yards against Notre Dame on just 17 touches, including a touchdown. He also had 20 carries for 151 yards and a touchdown against Clemson, 7.6 yards per carry in that game. Absolutely torched Clemson in that game. And then, of course, he went for 26 for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns against Kentucky, which is their big rivalry game. So this is a true freshman that in their big rivalry game at the end of the year goes out there and carries the ball 26 times and then goes for 18 for 99. And I thought outplayed Jonah Coleman in that game. And Jonah Coleman's a very good running back for Washington. Now, you got to take some of that outplayed with a grain of salt because he wasn't running against the same defense that Jonah Coleman was running against, but he just was the better player that day. But you look at it, and this is year 1, fellas. Year 1 for him. He went for 6.2 per carry against Miami. It wasn't like fluky where he beat up a lot of bad teams. He had 2 games where he combined for 10 yards against Georgia Tech and Stanford. So like he only carried the ball 2 times for 3 yards against Stanford, and a game they lost. So I think he's a big-time back, explosive back. He's a ton of fun to watch also. And then, of course, my number 1 back is Jeremiah Love. Reasons for this, it's production. Jeremiah Love is going to have production that's going to be outstanding this year. It's also about effectiveness and just being an elite overall player. When you look at the 5 backs that I have in my top 5, Isaac Brown's at 7.1 yards per carry. Jeremiah Love is right there at 6.9. Then there's a half a yard drop off between the next guy, Nicholas Singleton at 6'4", Jamal Haynes at 5'6", Desmond Reed at 5'3". I mean, everybody's going to talk about, Mekhi Hughes and at Tulane. And my whole thing with Mekhi Hughes is why he's not on my list. And this is kind of transitioning to the next segment of guys on the list. I like Mekhi Hughes. I think he's a good running back. I think that's going to be a good pickup for Oregon. I think he's going to put up numbers there. But this is a guy that averaged 5.3 yards per carry at Tulane compared to a guy at Notre Dame that averaged 6.9, a guy at Georgia Tech in a Power 5 league that averaged 5.6. And we have a comparison. I mean, he put up good rushing numbers. He had 1401 this year, or last year he had 13,978 as a freshman. He averaged 5.3 yards per carry both years. The year before that, they had Tajay Sharp at running back, who ran for 1,581 yards, averaged 6.9 yards per carry, or Tajay Spears, excuse me. And then the year before that, Tajay Spears averaged 6.7 yards per carry. So I just think he's a good back. He would be in my top 10, but he's not a top 5 back like people are making him out to be. If Mekhi Hughes was at Iowa State, if he transferred to Iowa State from Tulane, I don't think he's getting the same kind of push that he's getting now. I think a part of this is he's going to Oregon. That's just kind of my opinion. Good back, good pickup. I love that pickup for Oregon. I think he'll fit that system well. He's just not a guy that's going to play at the level of some of these guys, in my opinion. So that, and there's several guys like that. Like you can make a case, we talked about, Trev, you and I were talking about guys that we don't have on our list. Here's a guy that I think will end the season as a top 5 back, and that's Le'Veon Moss. And Trev and I had this battle because we both wanted to put him in the top 5, but here's why we didn't. The injury last year was late. And my worry is the uncertainty of where will he be as far as being not only healthy, but fully speed and back into game shape early in the year. And this is a consistent thing that we've done because it's like we talk about this with Boubacar Traore. We talk about this with guys at Notre Dame where it's like, look, yeah, it'd be great to have, hey, just ignore the injury, not talk about the injury or anything like that. But the reality is you have to take into account. And I just need to see that Le'Veon Moss is what he was before the knee injury before I can put him in top 5. If he's back to being the back he was last year, he'll be in his top 5. There's no doubt. That was the reason that I didn't have him, Trev. We can kind of spider this a little bit just as we talk about some of the other backs that we didn't have on this list that we really, boy, it either tough leaving this guy on, or I can't put him on now because he's got a lot to prove, but I won't be shocked if he's pushing for it as we get closer to the year or the end of the year.
Yeah, there's a handful of players for me that are on this list. One of them is one of my more favorite transfer portal pickups this offseason. That's Justice Haynes going to Michigan. Now, I need to see what he does at Michigan. He was a good running back at Alabama, but that offense last year is going through a scheme change. A lot of their rushing offense came from Jalen Milroe last year, but in the opportunities that he was given, I mean, Justice Haynes was a productive running back. I mean, he averaged 5.7 yards per carry. He had 7 rushing touchdowns. He was also splitting carries with Jam Miller, who I believe was their leading rusher out of the running back room last year. But in going into a more heavy run offense at Michigan, love that pickup. I don't know how close he's going to get to the top 5 in mine, depending on the type of season that he has. But given the state of the union of Michigan's receiving room going into this season, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say that they're probably going to be a run-heavy team this year as well. And I think that just –
Did Trev freeze? I think Trev froze.
I think he did too.
I wonder if they're having some things. He was about to lay into one too, guys. But no, with Justice Haynes, he's one that I couldn't justify putting him in my top 5 because I'm not going to do that to him. I won't let him get just
let him be mannequin style.
He's still down there frozen. But when I look at it with Justice, he's on my list too. And when you look at Michigan last year, or I should say Alabama last year, he was number 3 on the team in rushing. He had 448 yards. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry. Their leading rusher among the running backs was Jam Miller, who had almost twice as many carries as did Justice Haynes, 145 to 79, but he only had 120 more yards. He only averaged 4.6 yards per carry. I think it was a mistake that Alabama didn't use him more. And I think it could be the case, and they are going to very much be a run-heavy team. And I think Justice fits their system really well. That's a part of it too, Vince. You could put a running back that needs to be in a gap scheme, and you put him in an outside zone scheme, and he's not going to be as good of a back because his style doesn't fit that system as much. And then you could take a guy who's a great stretch running back and ask him to run counter and power all day, and he may not be as good of a back. And that's where with Justice Haynes. A couple other backs that I looked at. I think a Jaden Knott's going to have a bounce back year. I'm going to talk more about him in the unit breakdown, but I love Jaden Knott. His first 2 years at Cal, he's beat up last year, played behind a bad offensive line. I think he's going to be a lot better at Oklahoma this past year or this upcoming year. Darius Taylor from Minnesota is another guy that I like, Vince. He was banged up a lot in 2023, and I don't know that he was always healthy this past season. But, man, when he was on. He finished the year with 986 yards, only 4.8 per carry. I don't think he played behind a great offensive line. But, man, he had some moments last year. Missed the first game of the year. I don't think he was healthy early. A lot of his production early wasn't great. He had 124 yards against Nevada, but, didn't play against North Carolina. Only 4.6 per carry against Rhode Island, 3.4 against Iowa, 2.8 against Michigan, 1.9 against UCLA, but he got better as the year went on, had 300-yard games in his last 5 games. You look back to his freshman year in 2023 when he first battled injuries. Vince, he played 6 games that year, and in 4 of those games, he had at least 138 yards rushing, and in 3 of those 6 games, he had at least 193. So this kid's, only played 12 games last year, only played 6 games the year before, and he's already had 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 100-yard games. Darius Taylor is going to be a very good running back. He was a guy that he pushed to be on my list. So there's some really good backs. There's some other really good backs, but those are some guys that for me were really pushing to be on that list. There's a lot of other guys that I could see having breakout years to where. Mark Fletcher from Miami is a guy that I really like that could be a breakout. I like him and Jordan Lyles as a 1-2 punch. So those are some guys. Mekhi Hughes from Oregon is a good running back. He's a good running back. He's just not an elite running back, in my opinion. And then I've mentioned Jonah Coleman from Washington, who had he was over 1,000 yards this past year for the Huskies. He transferred in from Arizona, where he spent the prior year. He rushed for 871 yards, 6.8 yards per carry the year before. So this is a kid that's already got over 2,000 yards rushing in 2 years. He's another good back that I think is definitely in our conversation for top backs. So yeah, there's a lot of good backs, Vince. And then there's a lot of other good backs that they're good backs, but they're not in consideration for being in the top 10. Like somebody asked me, like, why didn't you talk about Fernando Mendoza at quarterback? And I'm like, I like Fernando Mendoza, and I think he was a great pickup for Indiana, but there's one thing to be a good player, and it's nothing to be in the consideration for top 10, because that's the elite of the elite. Katron Allen is a borderline top 10 running back. Jadarian Price is a borderline top 10 running back as well. I'm just not as high on Katron Allen as some other people. I think he's a good back, but I just think that's it. He's a good back that benefits from the system he plays in. So that's my list of my top 10 guys.
Okay. Well, we will let's transition here. So we'll give you the hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, all those fun things, and help us build up the CFB Nation site that the videos are on and the podcasts are on. Really appreciate you guys helping us out over there and getting us to where we need to be, and really appreciate it. And again, all we're asking for is your time. Hit that like button, the subscribe button, all those fun things, so that we can continue to bring you guys more exciting things when it comes to the big landscape of college football. That's the fun part about this particular channel. So any help you guys can give us is super appreciated. And we'll move on from there. So again, make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, that notification bell, and of course, share it with your family and friends. We'd really, really appreciate it.